And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Top Dog Talk podcast. This is episode 59. Top Dog Talk podcast. What went wrong against Kent State? That's what we're here to talk about here today. Alongside me, co-host Dan Kiley. Dan, how are you doing this Tuesday evening?
I'm doing great. I'm ready to get going. Ready to talk about whatever we're going to talk about today. You send them out. I'll knock them down.
Let's do it. First off, hot topics of the week. We have two this week, and I want to get your reactions to this, Dan. Guys, in the comments, if you're with us early, put your reactions to this in the comments. I'm going to throw the tweet up, Dan. Danny Cannell went to Twitter this week, or this past weekend. No surprise, Danny Cannell's always on Twitter, as we all know, if you are on the timeline. He says, and I quote, "I feel awful for Kansas. Not only should they be ranked in the top 25, but their resume is easily good enough to be in the top 15. But unfortunately, if you don't play in the SEC, you have to beat twice as many good teams to get half the credit." Dan, I want your thoughts and reactions to this tweet.
Yeah, well, my thought and reaction is what everybody in the world's thought and reaction probably was, is here's Danny Cannell again. And he is, any opportunity that he has to talk bad about the SEC, he will 100% take advantage of it. His takes are about as bad as you could possibly get. He's wrong on just about everything. But at the end of the day, it's all about driving clicks, and he's able to do that. He's got way more followers than I do. ESPN sees value in him. So at the end of the day, good for him, right? Good for him. But it's one of those things that I always talk about when we talk about the media and all. It's more about being click-based than it is being correct. And we see that time and time again. Now, there are some people in the media who are taking their job very seriously and do a really good job. He's not one of them, but he does drive traffic, which is good for the program. So does he have a point? Should Kansas be ranked? They probably should be ranked, but like 25 or 24. Yeah, they're undefeated, but they're not beating anybody of quality. The other part of his tweet was, if they were in the SEC and undefeated, they would be ranked. You would be correct, sir, because if they were in the SEC beating SEC teams and they were undefeated, they would deserve to be ranked. Heck, they might even be a top 10 team, but they're not in the Big Ten, and they're not in the SEC. They're not in the ACC. They're in the Big 12, right? And they haven't played anybody. Do you have the schedule up? Because that's way too small for me to see.
Yeah, that is supposed to be your schedule. Can you see now?
Yep, I got you. So you've got Tennessee Tech. Okay, Tennessee Tech. Houston, I'll give them credit for the Houston win. The West Virginia win was a good win. So, maybe they should be ranked. Maybe they should be ranked in the top 25. But it's at the end of the day, is Cannell taking a shot at the SEC? And the SEC, what he considers the SEC bias, just because he's an ACC guy. So I wonder if those takes would continue if FSU ends up in the SEC.
Dan, I did want to, to kind of help along with my point, along with, kind of what you're talking about. I mean, let's look at Tennessee's schedule. Number 8, Tennessee. They're in the top 10 for the first time, and I believe it's been a while. I think 2006 I heard on the SEC Shorts. Tennessee schedule. You beat a ranked Pittsburgh 34-27. They were maybe a top 15 team when they played them over there this past, just a few weeks ago. They beat them 34-27. Yes, I know Keaton Slovis got hurt, but hey, you play with who you have on the field, unless you're Alabama. Okay, unless you're Alabama. You don't play with it unless you're Alabama. You claim injuries are the reason you lose every game you lose. Play Ball State. Okay, week 1, yeah, cupcake. Akron, cupcake. Florida, in my opinion, yes, Florida's been slandered. I know we like to get on Florida's case. Georgia fans especially like to get on Florida's case. But hey, they beat a decent Florida team. Florida's a good win. Whenever you beat a former powerhouse like Florida, it's a good win, Dan, right?
Florida was ranked when they played them. So this illustration is a little bit, whacked or whatever, but Florida, a lot of people picked Florida to win that football game. That was a good win for Tennessee. We both hate Florida. Believe it or not, I don't hate Tennessee. That's completely off subject. I don't hate Tennessee, but I hate Florida, and that's a good win. So, Tennessee has a better schedule. I'm sorry. The Houston win was nice, but it's Houston. So, in what world are we? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Let's get on to the next hot topic, Harrison. I want to give it to you. Can I give it to you, or you just got more on this?
Go ahead.
All right. So my hot topic of the week that I wanted to ask is in a sporting event when something historical happens. In this case, it's Pujols hitting home run number 700, which was really awesome to see. I didn't think that was even possible at the beginning of the season. That's a topic for another day. If you were to catch that home run ball number 700, do you believe it's okay to keep that? Or is that something that you should get back? What is your take on keeping something like that? And I won't interject any of my opinion in this. So what is your opinion of keeping that baseball?
I believe when you go to a game like that, when you go to any baseball game, any sporting event, the only sports that I can say off the top of my head that you have to give the ball back or the puck is basketball. In the NBA game, college basketball game, you got to give the ball back if the ball goes out of bounds. Football, NFL, college, got to give the ball back. Baseball, there is no courtesy or golden unspoken rule. You get if someone hits a home run, a fly ball, get a toss up. You don't have to throw the ball back and play. Baseball changes baseballs regularly. It happens. Baseballs are just cycled through each and every game. Dan, you were a minor league umpire. You know more than anybody about how often, if you're behind home plate, how often you would reach into your bag and throw a new ball to the pitcher because, hey, maybe it got fouled off. Or, hey, pitcher can't grip the ball. He says, give me a new one. Okay, bet. In baseball, I'm fine with it. But when it comes to something historical, like Albert Pujols passing that 700 home run mark, or Alex Rodriguez passing the whatever historical whatever historical set he passed where the baseball didn't get returned back immediately. That is the big thing. Immediately. It got back eventually. I believe if it breaks a record or if it's historical for whatever reason, if you love the sport as much as you claim to or as much as you want to be there, I feel like you would want to give the ball back in any case. So I get it. The guy's going to want to get all the money he can out of this Albert Pujols ball. I understand. Yes, it is going to be life-changing money for the guy, and he's going to make a lot of money. But at least give Pujols and the Cardinals a chance to buy the ball off of you. But then again, it's really not your property to begin with. It's more along the lines of, hey, this baseball's owned by Major League Baseball. I mean, why should I have to buy it off of you? I'm yes, Dan, you can keep a ball, but if it's historical, I say give the damn ball back. What say you, Dan?
So here's the thing is, as an umpire, we had to rub up the baseballs in the major leagues. You don't have to rub them up yourself. Somebody will rub them up for you. But we go through about 8 dozen balls a game. So if you do the math on that, that is a lot of baseballs. 8 dozen a game is about what you go through. And then, for a big series, especially if you have like a postseason series, you might rub up 12 dozen baseball. That's 144 baseballs. And those things are about $14 a piece. That's a lot of money, right? So some directors are like, hey, don't give out a lot of them. You go to the game, you get a foul ball, home run ball, you get to keep those things, right? But when there is an achievement about to occur, they give them special baseballs, and those special baseballs are marked, right? And I think that baseball should put in a stipulation that if you buy a ticket to this game and you catch that ball, you have to give it back, right? So there are certain things that whether you acknowledge it or not on the back of your ticket, there are certain things by buying that ticket. So when you're on Ticketmaster or any other place, you click that little box, you're saying that you agreed to all that stuff, and everybody just does it out of habit, right? I think to protect themselves, baseball or whoever else, whenever there's a significant event about to occur, on those tickets, they should put it back in there where if you catch that ball, you have to give it back. Because here's my thing. If that ball was going to go to the Hall of Fame, right, like an entity or something like that, and Albert wasn't going to get it, keep it, bro. I mean, sell it, do whatever you want. But that ball is Albert's. It's Albert's accomplishment. It's not yours. You didn't do anything. You showed up and got lucky. And if you're that one dude that shows up with a net and stuff like that, taking balls from little kids so we can sell them, miss me with that guy. I mean, I would hurt that guy if he did that to my kid. And there are guys who specifically buy tickets in certain areas because they want to be the guy to catch that ball so they can cash in on it. I've just got zero respect for those people. Like, I've got zero respect for the grown-ups who stand there with a book full of cards trying to get people to sign after every single game so they can turn around and sell them on eBay. And my biggest issue is that you're affecting the way that the players approach the game. You're affecting the way that players approach kids. There are players who will not sign for children because they know that an adult put them up to it because they think that the athlete will sign for this little kid. And it's got to be ridiculous. And I mean, listen, I understand the concept of life-changing money. And I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't want that money. That's not my money. I didn't earn it. I didn't do anything. Like, if I win a lottery, it's because I played it, right? I don't correlate the two. It's not a lottery for me. I have zero respect for somebody that would keep that baseball.
With that being said, Dan, what is your rant of the week? Something you're mad about? Something you're pumped up about? What is it?
All right, so here's my rant of the week. And it is really simple. Don't tell me how to fan. I am allowed to be a fan however I see fit. And there is no right way to be a fan. There's no wrong way to be a fan. Can you be a classy fan? Absolutely, you could be a classy fan. Do you need to be online disrespecting kids or players or whatever? Probably not. But don't tell me how to fan. Don't tell me I'm not allowed to get angry when I'm watching a game. Don't tell me I'm not allowed to get upset when a guy doesn't make a play. Don't tell me I can't. I have to act this way or that way. I'm a fan. I can do whatever I want. Like, we watched that video that was on Twitter a couple of weeks ago where there's a guy watching the Bears game and his woman was like making fun of him for being upset about the game. That's me. That's me. That's who I am. You can ask my wife. You can ask anybody in this family. If they sit in the room and watch the game with me, sometimes I do. If the game starts getting a little bit sideways, guess where they go? Out the room. Because I'm yelling at the TV. I'm screaming at the TV. I'm cussing at the TV. That's how I watch the game. In the moment, I'll be like, the heck with that guy or the heck with this guy, whatever. I'm not out here in a public atmosphere. Like, I'm not on Twitter going, screw that guy. I'm not doing that, right? But in my house, I'm yelling and screaming. And, like, if I have a group text with somebody, I'm going to be like, oh, man, that guy, bah, or whatever. But 5 minutes after it's over, I mean, I have perspective and reality. I'm not super upset. But I can't stand the people who go on Twitter talking about, don't ever be upset with a kid. He's just a kid. You don't know. Like if you're not a real Georgia fan, if you get upset, you're not a real Falcons fan. If you get upset, it's like, no, I am a real fan. And that's why I get upset, because I have feelings. I'm emotionally connected to the team and I live and die on every single play. I love the baseball fans who tell you, it's a baseball season. It's 162 games. I don't understand why you would ever get worked up over one game, because I'm a fan. And if I'm watching the game, I'm invested in that game and I want to see my team win. And guess what? If they don't win, I'm pissed off. So that's me. That's how I watch the games. Don't tell me how to fan. You do it the way you do it. I'll do it the way I do it.
That was Dan's rant of the week. Guys, I think we all agree with Dan. I think there's different ways that everyone becomes a fan, or different ways people show themselves as fans. And there's really not anyone's job to tell us how to fan. But as Dan says, there are kind of moral things that each fan's kind of like standards, moral standards. Let's not go out on Twitter and say a kid sucks, especially an 18, 19-year-old college kid. If you want to say it about professionals, I guess they get paid for it. So, Falcons are grown men. They need to learn to preserve that hit. There's Zachary Moss, our secret GM of the Atlanta Braves. If you know, you know. But with that being said, it is time to talk about Kent State, Dan, because there were a lot of angry, upset Georgia fans, maybe a lot of them let down by this. It was a 39-22 win. Georgia was a 40-point favorite, Dan. 40-point favorite. And you know what? This isn't the first time that Georgia did not cover as a 40 plus point favorite. They are 2-2 against the spread so far this year. They've covered against Oregon. They've covered against South Carolina, but they failed to cover in the 2 games where they were massive, and I mean massive favorites over Samford and Kent State. Dan, first off, I kind of want to get your thoughts on the game as a whole. Maybe some points of, I didn't like what I saw here, or points of improvement and some good things. Let's not, everyone knows the negatives if you're on social media. Let's give us some positives too.
Oh, you want me to start with positives?
You can start wherever you want, Dan, but
I don't have a whole lot of positives, if we're being honest. And this game 100% inspired my rant, Harrison. Because watching this game, I was angry. And the reason I was angry is because to me, it felt like Georgia didn't take this game seriously. And they had 0 turnovers coming into this game. So you're able to protect the ball against Oregon, right? Whoever they played next, Stanford, I guess. Okay, you protected the ball against them. You go to South Carolina, you protect the ball against them. You play lights out. The reason I got upset about this game is because they didn't take it seriously. And you could tell that they didn't take it seriously by the way they didn't protect the football. You turn the ball over 4 times. You drop – how many touchdowns did we drop? I'm not talking about like Fugazi touchdowns where maybe they would have scored. I'm talking about literal ball in hands in the end zone 3, right?
I know 2 off the top of my head. I know there was the slant to the one high safety with McConkey that hit him right in the hands. I think we may have had one to Dylan Bell, unless I'm mixing it up with another game. But I know
it hit him in the back shoulder.
Hit him back shoulder. And I know that they dropped at least 4 passes in the first half alone.
Right. But so that is mental errors. That's not physical. I mean, and then Ladd did not have a good game. And we've talked about that. And he was able to bounce back and be productive a little bit in the second half. But it's mental focus, and that's why I was angry about this game. And that's why I don't have a whole lot of positive to say about it. Stetson Bennett was not crisp and clean. I mean, his stats say 27 of 36, 272 in an interception. Listen, I get it. But this is a game where if you're a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, you put up 500 yards. You just do. I mean, this is not real competition for you, right? Listen, okay, positive. Brock Bowers played lights out. That man didn't do a single thing wrong. You could find something that almost every single player on that team did wrong. You can't find anything that Brock Bowers did wrong. I don't know if he missed a block. I don't know if he didn't do a darn thing wrong, and he looked impressive. So, yes, there's a great one. But otherwise, I mean, our running backs did not look crisp. And I know there's a specific running back that was getting a lot of heat for whatever reason, and that's silly, right? I mean, Dejon Edwards to me in this, Dejon Edwards I think should get more carries, but to say that Dejon should get more carries doesn't mean I don't like the other 2. It's just that I really like what he has, right? And I feel like our fan base from time to time has the what's the word I'm looking for? It has the tendency to attack one guy to clear room for the other guy.
When 2 things can't be true at the same time is what you're trying to get at,
Right. It's like you can want more carries for one guy, but that doesn't mean at the same time that you don't like the other guy. And we had a running back that was just getting a lot of smoke for no reason. And I'm glad that particular guy, Kendall Milton, is part of our football team. And, no, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and tell you he's the greatest running back in the history of the world when maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But I don't understand why our fan base has the tendency to attack people because, did he have the best game in the world? No, he didn't. I think he would tell you that he didn't, right? But I mean, to disrespect him is wrong. And that was one thing that really bothered me about this game is how, we talk about don't tell me how to fan, right? Well, I mean, I won't tell you how to fan, but I tell you, Like, I don't understand why you would badmouth a kid on our football team.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, and especially getting up in the public scene of calling out parents is definitely not a good thing to do. Like Dan says, we're not going to tell you how to fan because Dan just had a whole segment on it. But if you're a fan of the team, why would you go after a player's parents or a player themselves? Doesn't quite make sense if you're a fan of the team. So with that being said, yeah, Dan, Brock Bowers was a positive. He's always, this whole season so far, he's been a positive. There hasn't been one game where, I know, there's been some games where he's been quiet, according to Brock Bowers standards. There have, okay? First two games, Georgia didn't really need him. Georgia spread the ball around. Kenny McIntosh was the story of those first two games, whether you like it or not. He made big plays. Kenny McIntosh was the most explosive player on Georgia's offense in the first two games. Turn the page. South Carolina and Kent State. Brock Bowers is that explosion. I don't know if it's maybe based on something they saw on tape. I don't know if maybe it's because something's going on with Kenny or not. I don't know. That's just the way the game plan is shaped out. Kenny was the first two. Bowers is the second two. And hey, we don't know. Maybe someone else is going to be the explosive player in these next two games. But I will say, I would have loved to see Georgia get the ball to Bowers more. Now, I can't sit here and tell you, hey, they didn't try, because knowing Todd Monken and knowing any good offense coordinator, he's going to try and manufacture touches for his best player. That is just what you do to win football games. But what I will say is, Dan, here's my negative. And it doesn't show up on the stat sheet. Georgia allowed 93 rushing yards in the game against Kent State. But you go back and watch the second half, even at the time being, it didn't feel like that. I was shocked when I went on the stat sheet after the game and said, whoa, Georgia only gave up 93 rushing yards? Georgia, for a little bit there in the second half, when Kent State had that 70-yard drive, I think it was the third quarter, had that 70-yard drive. It felt like Georgia was getting beaten at the line of scrimmage on defense. Beaten bad. And I know, everyone's talking about, we don't have Jalen Carter. And guys, here's my point. You can't sit here and say the injuries to John Mechie and Jamison Williams don't matter, but then turn around and say, do the same exact thing that you accuse Bama fans of doing, which is using injuries as a shield. Georgia will not always have Jalen Carter, just like Alabama will not always have Jamison Williams and John Mechie. Okay? Georgia has to get these kids better, which is why they're playing with so much depth on defense, because they have youth and inexperience, Dan. And what is the best way to get youth experience? It's by playing them in a game. So I will say, Georgia's defense by no means played a perfect game, but when you go back and rewatch it for the first time since watching the game, I think you'll start to notice that defense did not get much help from the offense. It was not complimentary football for Georgia this past weekend. The first four drives, go look at the first four drives. You score a touchdown in your first offensive drives. You come back. There's the muff punt after 3 and out. The defense got a 3 and out and a muff punt. After that 3 and out, I think everybody, including myself, were saying, this is just going to be another game that's over by halftime. Muff punt, an interception, a fumble, boom. Flip of a coin, bat an eye, it's a ball game. That's what happens. You cannot be -2 in the turnover column and expect to win football games convincingly.
Well, this is the same. My whole thing is, if you're going to criticize one team, you have to be able to criticize them all, right? So we criticized Auburn for losing to Penn State. They lost 41-12 to Penn State a couple of weeks ago, and they put up 415 total yards, and they weren't even in the ball game. Why were they not in the ball game? Because they turned the ball over 4 times. So Georgia puts up, and you put the stat up here for me, 529 yards. Georgia put up 529 yards. But you know why we didn't blow out the game? Because we had 4 turnovers. And when you turn the ball over against anybody, you're going to allow them to stay in the football game. And, again, I chalk it up to not being mentally focused and not mentally prepared. But at the end of the day, all right, think about Kirby's press conference after Oregon. Did he seem overly happy? No, he didn't.
Somewhere in the middle. Right?
Stanford, he was just like, no. Just like angry Kirby, right? After South Carolina, he's like, angry Kirby, don't want to talk about it. They're like, no, I'm just focused on blah, 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 blah. Kirby Smart after Kent State. Smile ear to ear. I respect Kent State. They're a great team, and we had a good week of practice, and I'm excited about this team. But because Kirby knew he had that ammunition to walk into Monday's practice and be like, y'all are going to die this week. He was so excited that they played like crap. And I was talking to my stepdad on the phone today, and or yesterday, and he was talking about his Michigan team who squeaked by, and he said he didn't care. A win is a win, and he liked the fact that they struggled and were able to get the win. And I think you have to look at it the same way for Georgia, right? Like, did you want to struggle? Did you enjoy Saturday? Hands raised, I did not enjoy Saturday, but if it makes you a better team down the road, I'm willing to deal with it. I think those noon games against crap teams, and Jeremiah said this in our group text, is he hates noon games against crap teams because you never play well. And I agree with him. And once you allow a team to believe that it's actually going to be a football game, and there is no switch in the world to switch where you can just go ahead and put. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So, at the end of the day, was it pretty? No. Did they get the win? Absolutely. And get a great opportunity to go up to Missouri and kick their butt and take out some frustrations. How about that?
And it's going to be a 7:30 game. 7:30, first night game of the season, Dan. I know it's on the road, but heck, Missouri always has some type of atmosphere there. I remember when Georgia's played there in years past. There's always been something there. I don't know if this is going to be a sellout. I would imagine with the defending champs coming to town, I would imagine it's going to be pretty close to capacity, but don't put it past Missouri because they just come off a heartbreaker against Auburn. You know, a team that is struggling. Not the best of games to watch if you want to watch beautiful football. But Dan, speaking of noon games, I think there's a tendency for people to talk about noon games and how people handle noon games as a culture thing. I don't think it is a culture thing. I think you could have the best culture in all of college football, but there's just still going to be those times where, hey, the team isn't taking somebody seriously. And from our perspective, outside perspective, it did look like Georgia was kind of reading their press clippings a little bit or not buying into the fact that, hey, on any given Saturday, you can lose no matter who it is. That's the outside perspective. And I don't care what anybody tells me from inside the building. They're not going to put it out there. They will not that they were looking past Kent State because that's a bad look for them. But you go back and look through history, those noon games have always been a spur in Georgia's side. I mean, heck, you go back a few years ago, Georgia lost a noon game to South Carolina, and I hate to bring it up because I know it still scars people to death. But Georgia did it. But I did like a tweet someone put out, I believe it was from the Backstreet Boys, said something along the lines of, if this was back in 2016 and Georgia played like this, you probably lose, which I tend to agree. I think if you played like that a few years ago, I think Georgia probably loses that game. A, because they don't have the talent. Didn't have the talent they have now. B, I don't think the culture and the buy-in was there where it is now. I think Georgia, obviously you're talented enough to get by. But Dan, what is the marking of a great team is you can play, your worst is still enough to win. Georgia played its absolute worst game of the season and still had enough to win. And it wasn't by the skin of their the skin of their chin. It was, we still won by 17 points. Where you go back and look at Alabama, they played their worst game against Texas on the road at Texas. They won by 1 point. They won by 1 point, Dan. They were a 20-point favorite.
You want to talk about go back to 2016. I was at the Georgia-Nicholls State game. They won that game 26-24. I don't remember the specifics of it because I have somehow blocked that game out of my memory. But I was there with my son, and I maybe I'm wrong, and somebody would definitely be able to correct me. I think we had to pull that game out of the fire. I for some reason I was thinking like maybe they had like a field goal attempt at the end of the game to win it or something. But I mean, to your point, and the reason I bring that up is because I really thought we were going to lose that game. Like, I'm sweating, like scared to death we were going to lose that football game. We played like dog crap against Kent State. but not even for a millisecond did I feel like we were going to lose that game. And I think that is the biggest difference. To your point, oh hell, here we go. What do we got here? I don't know why you're doing this. I can't read this stuff.
Sorry, I'll read it out for the people there. Georgia had 3 turnovers in this game, had 3 penalties for 34 yards, had 161 yards rushing, 167 yards rushing, 206 yards. He had 373 yards of offense, 5 of 13 on third down. He allowed 6 of 16 on third down, 236 yards. So it was a much closer game in terms of yardage and in third down. Some of the key statistics, you were at 0 in turnovers thanks to Nicholls State playing just as bad as you were on turnovers. But like to Dan's point, Georgia almost lost that game.
You probably should have. So listen, we're going to go to Missouri. We're going to go to Missouri, and we are going to. I think it is a good week to be a Georgia fan because I think there are a lot of kids who are having a really rough week of practice, and they are looking to hit somebody else. And I have a sneaky suspicion that Georgia is going to look as explosive as they've ever looked on Saturday. And I think you're going to see Kirby with the biggest grin on his face that you've ever seen on that coach's face because he knows that he gets to unleash the dogs on Saturday with some vigor behind him. And actually, side note, really good thing that we're not playing at home on Saturday because it was going to be messy. But we don't have a whole lot to say about the Missouri game. But you did see some good news for the dogs right before we came on. You want to tell them, Harrison?
Yes, as Zachary Moss flashed up on the screen, his comment, Georgia did gain a commitment from 4-star wide receiver Tyler Williams out of, I believe it was Lakeland, Florida, if I remember off the top of my head. As someone who helps put together the show notes here with Dan, probably should have prepped for this because, we probably should have known that this was coming or is a real possibility. So that is on me, but I'm not a recruiting expert one bit. And I think Dan would tell you he's not a recruiting expert either. So I don't even feel comfortable sitting here and trying to tell you about Tyler Williams. But I do know from a few things that Brooks Austin has said over his time covering Tyler Williams, it is that he could be a pretty good player as evidenced by his high star rating. I know it's not. The stars are not everything in high school to college, that transition. It's not everything. But it does give you a little feeling of where people around the industry think he could be. DGD Podcast, Robert Reynolds, shout out to the DGD Podcast. About Mizzou, Eli could get his coffin nailed shut after Saturday. I could see that with there were rumors that Auburn was going to fire Brian Harsin if they lost to Missouri last week at home, which I don't doubt at all. But why put that out there? If you know you're going to put them, if you know you're going to put the dog to rest, why you got to let the dog know? Why let everybody know? Why put it out there that you're going to fire your head coach? If you know for a fact that it just takes one loss to fire your coach, why do it? Why do it? It doesn't make sense to me. I don't agree with that. Zachary Moss says also Luther Burton went out and deleted everything Mizzou related to his social media. I don't.
Luther Burton confirmed Luther Burton is going to be the first player in NCAA history to transfer in the middle of the football game, play the second half with the Dogs.
I will say this for everyone out there: please don't read too much into this. It happens all the time with kids these days, especially on social media. You delete things off your Instagram, delete things off your Twitter all the time, delete all association with something. And at the end of the day, it comes out to be nothing. Comes out to just be, you're making headlines about nothing. So we'll wait and see on that. If anything does progress.
Didn't somebody else do this like a couple months ago, right before the season started? Wasn't there somebody else who did that?
Potentially. It's not coming off the top of my head.
Yeah, there was another big name player that deleted all of his stuff right before the season, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm not going anywhere." Keyshawn
Boutte, yeah. I do remember him deleting. There was rumors about him entering the transfer portal after LSU lost to, I believe it was FSU, Florida State. earlier in the season, but since then he's had a child, so congrats to him. And I believe he's still with the team at this point. But anyways, guys, Dan, 27.5-point favorite, just Georgia cover on the road, 7:30 p.m. kick.
So I hate saying that a team will cover, especially these lofty, but after the way that they played against Kent State, I would lay those points because I have a feeling that Georgia. So it's one of two things. Either you lay the points because you believe Georgia's an elite football team and they're going to be pissed off and they're going to play, or you don't think Georgia's an elite football team and Kent State exposed them. So you're either on one side of the equation or the other. If you're like I am and you believe Georgia is an elite football team, you take those points and you laugh about it because I have a feeling that Missouri is going to catch a butt beating this weekend.
Yeah, I'm along the same lines with you. Georgia's coming off a disappointing performance, whether they want to say it out in public or not. They know they underperformed. They know they could have won that game by a lot more. They know they could play a lot more clean than they actually did. I'm not going into this week, before the Kansas State game even took place. I'm going to be completely transparent with everybody, just like me and Dan talked about over the weekend. The rant of the week that we were going to do, and it may not even been Dan's rant of the week. It may have been my rant of the week. Was Desmond Howard said in an interview with Dog Nation's Mike Griffith to pump the brakes on Stetson Bennett's Heisman talk, which at the time seemed kind of wild because he was playing like one of the best players in college football. And I'm not saying he's not playing like one of the best players in college football because, he had one bad game, still got a rushing touchdown of it. And like Dan said, in that game, when you play 4 quarters against a team you're a 40-point favorite against, if you play 4 quarters, you're supposed to put up numbers. So let's that was going to be something we talked about because I think going into the game, we all expected Georgia to go out and blow them out of the water, and they did not. So, complete transparency, that was something we wanted to talk about, but now it's not.
Well, I do want to add one thing here before we wrap this up is I do want to see Georgia establish a running game. And I know that seems so foreign for a Georgia football team to say is we have started to throw the ball, which I have been all about. I love throwing the football. I'm the fan version of Monken. I want to throw the ball on every single play. But I've always said that knowing that we could run the ball on anybody at any given time. And I don't feel like we can do that right now. So I need Georgia to be able to show me that we can still run it down somebody's throat when it matters because I don't feel like we're running it as efficiently as we have in the past. I would love to see them do that. And then one other thing that I wanted to bring up, and I kind of wanted to get your take on this is obviously we know Georgia Tech moved on from their coach and their athletic director. We know that they're going to hire an athletic director first before they hire a coach. We're not going to get into all the coaches, especially not get into Dion. But one of the coaches that they mentioned was Del McGee. And I don't think Del McGee takes that job. I don't think that's a job that anybody should take, to be completely honest. Not right now. I wouldn't want to be this guy. But it brought up a question somebody asked me, and I asked it to the group, and everybody just kind of ignored it. How are we feeling about Del McGee right now? Is he still, in your mind, one of the elite coaches on the coaching staff? I know that publicly he's been kind of taking a little bit of criticism because he's missed on some really talented backs here lately where he used to get the best of the best, and now we're not necessarily getting the best of the best, especially with the Justice Haynes going to Alabama. I know that there was some frustration in the Georgia fan base. How are you feeling about Dell? Do you still feel like he's one of the elite of the elite, or is he maybe getting towards the back end of his career, maybe doesn't have the enthusiasm for recruiting like he did before?
I think you can kind of answer your own question in the sense that he's being brought up to some head coaching jobs. He's a candidate, and yes, he's been a candidate before. This isn't the first time that his name has been brought up in contention for some jobs, and it probably won't be the last unless he takes this job. Then it may be the last that he gets brought up in for a little bit there. I feel confident that Del McGee is still a great recruiter. I don't have anything to believe otherwise. Georgia has a pretty good room. I know you need. Right now, everyone believes Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton will both be off to the NFL for this season, opening up 2 spots in that running back room. And Georgia needs 2. That's the prevailing feeling. This cycle's not over. And we talk about it all the time. Recruiting's not over until the national letter of intent is signed. I know, it's cliche, but I think he's still one of the top coaches on the coaching staff. Hey, maybe he is the right fit for Tech. They need somebody that is a culture fit. In my opinion, me and Dan have talked about it before. Between you and I, is they're not going to get a national championship head coach. They're not. You're not going to get someone that matches the aura of a Nick Saban, an Urban Meyer, Kirby Smart. At this point, you're not going to get that guy. What can they get? They can get somebody with name value. They can get somebody with a little star power behind them. Yes, Coastal Carolina's head coach, somebody that is being brought up. I'm blanking on his name. He's been brought up a little bit here. We'll see. But I'm leaning more of the way of, hey, they can land Deion Sanders. That's a huge hire. And I like Deion more at Auburn. I think Deion would like Auburn a little bit more besides the expectations. Auburn's job is not open yet being probably the key word here. But I maybe Dell takes the job. I don't know Dell McGee. And it's too early in the season to say whether or not he takes that job. But hey, they need someone with star power and someone who can recruit.
And Robert wanted us to mention Miami losing to Middle Tennessee State?
Yeah, that's
Oh, that was glorious. So I guess Texas and Miami are back, baby. Back to being crap again. Oh, that was so great. Oh,
the Texas Tech loss, to be fair, is not as bad. I think that one should have been expected, considering there were some injuries on that side. But shoot, man, Miami losing. Whoo, yeah. Mario Cristobal, you got some work to do, bud.
I love that Oregon fans were taking shots at Cristobal the entire weekend. Just like, hey, congratulations, Miami. This is why we didn't want them anymore, and all this other stuff. And like, oh, now you get to know. But yeah, man, it's been a pretty wild and crazy college football season to start out with. I know in the preseason we talked about we love to see upsets, and I think I said at that time you don't actually see a whole lot of upsets. Like you may have one or two that or whatever for a whole season, but this year I feel like we've had quite a few. And we talk about parity in college football. I don't believe we'll ever get to the point where it's like a level playing field where everybody's on the same level. I don't believe that. I believe you have your elite teams and then you have your middle of the road teams. And then I have some teams at the bottom who can pop up and beat a good team once in a while. But it is fun to see.
Absolutely. And I want to bring something up real quick, Dan, because it's something we sparred on in the offseason. You kind of brought around to it, kind of hinted at it. So if you've been with us for a little bit while now, you probably should have seen the preseason expectations, preseason predictions. We gave our SEC standings. Me and Dan kind of sparred a little bit over Arkansas, Texas A&M, the placement of those two programs. Dan, I don't think it's over. It's definitely not over. And your boys Arkansas lost this weekend. Heartbreaking game. Fun game to watch because there was a lot that transpired. But I wanted to bring this up. I wasn't feeling too hot about my pick of Texas A&M being second. It was a comfortable pick. It was the normal pick back in the offseason. Heck, they just beat Arkansas, a ranked Arkansas that was in the top 10 this past weekend. Okay? They got some talent. But it doesn't come without its losses. A&M just lost one of their best receivers for the rest of the year. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, Dan, that Texas A&M probably comes in third, just like you predicted. Or third or fourth.
It's only a matter of time. Listen, I know that they beat Arkansas, and Sam, you let me down, buddy. I really needed you to KJ. Come on, KJ. I mean, I'm kind of with Jonathan, where like I said, Ole Miss. Like if I had to pick a different SEC team to root for, I'd probably pick Ole Miss. But he picked Arkansas. I could root for Arkansas. I mean,
any day of the week.
I wouldn't have rooted for Arkansas because of Bobby Petrino, and I can't stand anything about that man. But Sam Pittman is a national treasure and deserves to be treated that way. So is Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin is the gift that keeps on giving. Like if you don't love Lane Kiffin, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, like they let me. Yeah, I mean, like if I had to pick a different SEC team, it would be Hotty Toddy. I mean, I would be all about some Lane Kiffin. But yes, they let me down, and I need somebody to beat the crap out of Texas A&M. I'm like, they've lost a game already, but like they haven't been humiliated yet.
October 8th, Dan. October 8th. I think.
No, I need more than that. Like
October 8th.
Oh, Robert thinks LSU is going to give it to him. That would be fine, Robert. I'm on board. Listen, I would be on board with everybody beating them.
I was looking at something, Dan. LSU's defense ranks 11th in total defense, right behind Georgia's. I didn't know that. I didn't realize LSU's defense was that good. And they're starting to put together an offense. They get Kayshon Boutte back and lock in and start getting Jaden Daniels and those two some chemistry. I don't think it's out of their own possibility that LSU gets in a shootout with anybody with Texas A&M. Texas A&M's offense is not good. They're averaging around 24, 21 points a game. It's not good. They rely on their defense just like 2019 Georgia, although I think Georgia's offense was probably a little bit better, had a lot more had some more talent on the offensive end as opposed to Texas A&M. But hey, Dan's looking pretty much like a genius at this moment because you got all those 5 stars, Jimbo, but you haven't really done anything out of them with them. And hey, what are they going to do against Mississippi State? Georgia has Mississippi State in the schedule, Dan. And after last week's performance, it's going to be interesting to see how Georgia performs in Starksville against Mississippi State. So with that being said, guys, that is going to wrap it up for episode 59 of the Top Dog Talk podcast. We appreciate everybody who is with us down here in the comments. Shout out to Zachary Moss, Jonathan Williams, DGD, the DGD podcast, Robert Reynolds, and yes, he's not here, but our friend Jeremiah Stoddard, down on the power rankings again. The friend rankings, not here, not present, not show us support. So with that being said, give us a follow. Hold up. I am not prepared. There we go. Give us a follow. There's the Twitters down below. At Dan Kiley3, at Harrison Reno 11, at Harrison Reno. Gosh. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe here on YouTube. Guys, I was talking to Dan this past Friday. We've been doing well, guys. We've been happy. The channel, we hope you enjoy the content. We've been having a lot of fun doing it. We continue to want to see this place grow so we can get some more listeners and interact with more of you. Also, real quick, we got a special announcement, Dan.
Yes, tell him, Harrison. Harrison, what are you doing this weekend, buddy?
The Top Dog Talk podcast is taking over high school football on Friday nights, guys. As of right now, Dan and I are selected to cover Gainesville at Lenoir. It's going to be Lanier. Gosh, sorry. There's a place back in my hometown called Lanier. Make sure to check us out on the radio network. On the radio, Dan, you want to give some details?
Yeah, it's going to be on 94.5 The Lake, and you can go to Access WDUN, and there's going to be a link on there. Just go to the sports section and then Friday Night Lights, and then underneath the Friday Night Lights thing, it will give you a link to every single game. You can watch us. Harrison has been over preparing this week. He is excited about his opportunity to be on the radio. I hope that you guys will tune in at least a little bit to the game and listen to your man Harrison do his first game on the radio. I enjoy Dan's rants too, buddy. Thank you.
We created Dan's Rants, Roberts, because the dude likes to speak. So I was like, hey, dude has some juice, as our friends Brooks would say about Dan. Dan has juice, so let him show that juice. Guys, make sure to come hang out with us on Friday night. If you want to get your taste of Friday night football action on the radio, make sure you come hang out with Dan and I. It's going to be a fun night, guys. We're talking football for, maybe 2 hours? I think 2 hours. I haven't been at a high school football game in probably about a year now. So with that being said, that is going to be episode 59 of the Top Dog Talk podcast. On behalf of Dan Kiley and on behalf of all of the Top Dog Talk YouTube channel and the 4Y podcast every Sunday over at the Film Guy Network at 7:30 talking the National Football League, guys. That is going to wrap it up for episode 59 of the Top Dog Talk podcast. We'll see you back next week.